Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Ryan Recommends, the show where I talk about movies I would like to talk about. And today I got to watch the film Spider-Man Homecoming, the new Marvel film from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It is the first time we are actually seeing Spider-Man as a solo film with Marvel Studios. So let's just begin. I did watch every single Spider-Man movie before going to see Homecoming. I wanted to see how I felt about each film because it has been a while since I've last seen a Spider-Man film. A lot of people say, oh, we've gotten too many Spider-Man reboots within so many days and time. But for someone like me, I don't really watch too much Spider-Man. Spider-Man Homecoming is the first film where we finally get to see Tom Holland take role as Peter Parker. I want to start off with some of the better things that are in this movie. Because there's more pros than there are cons. But there are cons. But let's start with the pros. Most of the great things about this movie is that it's essentially Peter Parker is great. I think Tom Holland does a really good job balancing the character. What I think Tobey Maguire does really well is he's a really good Peter Parker. As a Spider-Man, he's okay. He's not bad. He's not great. He's pretty okay. I like him enough, especially in Spider-Man 2. I think he's a really good character because he's an interesting character. We all can relate to Peter. We can all understand where he's coming from. We all know where he is in his life. We all have been there once before. And if not, that's okay. He's a very ground-to-earth character. We can relate to somebody like Peter more than somebody like Tony Stark. You know, because Tony Stark is like a billionaire. Not everybody's a billionaire, so we can't really relate with Tony Stark. But this is why Spider-Man is so much better, is because everybody can really connect with Peter Parker. And he's just like you and me. He's just a guy that got the circumstances of, I got these powers, now it's my responsibility to uphold these powers for the greater good of humanity and to save people. What I love about this movie, especially, I think is the strongest part of this movie, is how small-scaled everything is. My biggest complaint with most of the Marvel films is they try to go too big. They always go for the grand epic, this is a deep, impactful, we're gonna destroy the universe villain. In Spider-Man, he's just trying to fight an arms dealer. That's it. That's all the Vulture is. The Vulture is just some guy that took Chitauri technology and tried to use it to sell weapons. And he's using like the modern technology of Earth and fusing it with the alien technology, and that's a lot of fun, and it's really well done, and it's super simple. We understand also where the villain's motives are coming from. They make a lot of sense, and it's fun. It's something simple. It doesn't go too crazy over the top. It's so small scaled, and that is so refreshing because I'm so sick of these cataclysmic end of the world destruction be all end all fights, and it's so nice to finally just sit down and enjoy that. I took that with deep appreciation because, especially after watching The Amazing Spider-Man 2, it was one of those, thank God it's not something like that, because it could have been worse. So I love where they were going with this movie. This movie also has a really great Peter Parker. Peter Parker is such an interesting character. Again, I went off track a lot, but Tom Holland is so good in this movie. Tom Holland, he's like 20 some odd years old. He's about my age. And what's funny is this kid, I swear to God, I believed he was in high school. He looks like a high schooler. He definitely acts like a high schooler. He makes dumb mistakes. He's a kid. And that was so good. It was so refreshing. At least, back in the Sam Raimi films, I didn't believe Peter Parker was a kid. I believed that Peter Parker was played by a 30-year-old, and the high school was filled with 30-year-old people trying to be teenagers. In this movie, they actually look like teenagers. They all might not be the age of teenagers, but they definitely look the part. I love that we also get the aspect from Spider-Man 2, which is one of my favorite aspects, is how he tries to juggle between his personal life and also with his home life, and his Spider-Man life. He's got a lot going on his plate, and he has so much to deal with, and it's so interesting to constantly see him, struggling with school, and then he's got to be Spider-Man, and he's got to keep up his friendships, he's got to keep up with clubs and activities. He struggles trying to find that balance in his life, and I think that's one of the best parts about Spider-Man 2 is his struggle with being Spider-Man on top of the responsibilities of what he has to be outside of being Spider-Man. And those are what makes him so interesting. That's what makes Peter Parker such a compelling character. Now, will I say it was done better in this movie? No, I would say Spider-Man 2 does it a little bit better, but that's also because Spider-Man's a lot older. Spider-Man has to go to college, and he has to go through, he's getting fired from his job. Mary Jane's off going to marry, Jameson's astronaut son. Aunt May's still upset and distraught over the loss of Ben Parker, and like her house is going to be foreclosed on. He's always late with his bills, with rent, and it's so important and so well done, and I feel like that really worked in Spider-Man 2 because it was all about him when he's older. Not saying it doesn't work when he's a kid, it still works. I just think that it was juggled a little bit better in Spider-Man 2. But in Spider-Man Homecoming, it's still really good. I still think it's well done. Another great thing about this movie is I like the comedy. A lot of people say that these Marvel movies have too much comedy in it, and I completely agree. There are moments where I don't want this movie to be funny. Civil War had this problem. Civil War had the issue where it constantly had to remind you, oh, we're funny. So it would be a really serious moment, and then all of a sudden, let's throw in a joke. That's the reason why I don't like scenes like the airport scene in Civil War. Because in Civil War, it's supposed to be this big dramatic moment where we have Captain America and Iron Man, pretty much the whole Avengers coming in to fight, and then all of a sudden you have all these characters throwing one-liners left and right, and it's supposed to be a serious, duke and brawl of everybody, and it's a moment where all of our heroes are divided and split, and it's supposed to be emotional and impactful, but it's played for comedy. This, however, is welcomed comedy. In Spider-Man Homecoming, the comedy doesn't feel out of place. It doesn't feel distracting. It doesn't feel like it doesn't need to be there. These are high school kids, and they are weird, they're awkward, and they do make jokes. They have a sense of humor, and it works for Spider-Man's case because Spider-Man is quippy and funny and interesting, and he's got a lot going on with him. And that's why I think Spider-Man is so good, and I think that's why the comedy is welcomed here. It's not taking itself way too seriously. Although there are some points where I did wish that we had some moments of being serious. Like there's a scene where the Vulture has a guy that's essentially, blackmailing him, and he's essentially telling him, no, I'm just gonna tell your family, what do you do for a living? And then the Vulture, picks up a gun, he shoots the guy, and it vaporizes him. Now, the thing is that moment could be really tense and scary, where it's like, this guy means, business, but they make a joke out of it. And that's where I have a bit of a problem with it. It's like, you didn't need to make a joke. You could have made him more serious. You could have made him a little bit more intimidating and make us feel worried for Peter's life, that this guy is unhinged. He is not afraid to do something that extreme. And I feel that is what this movie was truly lacking. I mean, for the most part, I think the plot twist that happens in this movie was genuinely jaw-dropping. I've never sat through a movie and been this surprised, which is why I'm not really going to talk too much about it, because honestly, it's a big spoiler. It's a humongous spoiler, and I don't want to get too deep into that spoiler. That big spoiler was huge, and I think that was a really jaw-dropping moment. And just in case if you really haven't seen it and you're just sticking through this video and not giving a crap, I still won't give you that spoiler, because even if you know the spoiler, I still won't give it to you, because I still think it's worth to see it for yourself. Because when you don't know it, it's incredible. I did not see it coming, and it was probably one of the most holy shit moments I've ever had in a movie in a long time, where I was genuinely shocked. The movie does so many fun things. I enjoy the action scenes well enough. I guess I want to talk about how I think the action scenes are just okay. I'd say the action scenes of Spider-Man Homecoming are actually some of the weakest parts of the movie. Personally speaking, I think Marvel has had a struggle with action. You see, ever since I want to say it would be since I think Civil War was a big problem. Civil War had a lot of moments where it was quick cut, fast-paced editing, and a lot of shaky cam. And that was very prevalent in the very beginning of Civil War. I was like, oh, during that first action scene, there was a fight scene with Black Widow, and it was just so fucking jumbled, and it was such a mess to watch. And it was disorientating, and I couldn't see what was happening, and it was just kind of nuts. Because this camera was just shaking too much, and I hate shaky cam. Shaky cam makes me nauseous, and it just hurts my my eyes and I just can't process it well. And I'd even say the original Spider-Man movies doesn't use shaky cam almost at all. It's very smooth action. You can definitely see what's happening. You know what's going on. In this movie, I felt like the action was just constantly just shaky cam, and it was just disorientating, and I just couldn't really get a hold of it. I didn't like the action scenes too much. That was the stuff I thought was the weakest. I'd even say all the parts where Spider-Man is involved, honestly, I thought were kind of weak. Not bad, they were just not nearly as good as the parts where it's just about Peter Parker. It's still entertaining though. The action scenes are not the worst I've seen. It's just, they were just underwhelming, I would say. Especially fight scenes between the Vulture and Spider-Man, I felt like were a little, they were a little wibbly wobbly. They could have used a little work. I feel like their fight scenes were a little slow. They weren't as insanely as exciting as I was hoping for, because in my mind, when they could have a lot of fun with it, but I feel like they didn't really fully take advantage of what they could have done with the Vulture. I think for the most part, I watched this movie more as a comedy and a coming-of-age story. It really works in those aspects the best, and I think that's what makes it strong. I love the small-scaled setback fights where it's essentially just Spider-Man versus arms dealers, and that's way more captivating than, I'm gonna turn the entire city into lizard people. Thanks a lot, Amazing Spider-Man, you fucking piece of shit. And then, you know, things like that I think are way more interesting and way better. Would I say this is a perfect movie? Absolutely not. Would I say this is one of the best Marvel movies? Possibly. I would definitely say it's up there with the Marvel Cinematic Universe films, and I'd actually say it's pretty good. I don't know if I'd put it in my top 5, but I'd definitely like to reconsider thinking about it for a little bit. Overall, I'd still say this is a pretty solid movie. If you haven't seen it in theaters, and you sat through this whole video, Godspeed you. You just got a lot spoiled for you, and also, it's pretty good. I would say that it's still worth it, and I'd say you should totally go out and see it, and I hope that everybody goes out and sees this. But I would say this is the second best Spider-Man movie. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 2 is still the best Spider-Man movie. And if any of you give me the whole, well, Tobey Maguire is not very good, blah, I would actually highly disagree with you. I actually think Tobey Maguire is pretty good as Spider-Man. And yes, I do think Tom Holland is a good Spider-Man. I think both of them are equal to each other in different ways, but I'd say Tom Holland does a really good job balancing the character a little bit more. But unfortunately, I would say that the Spider-Man scenes were just kind of weak. They just needed to be a little bit more exciting. They needed to have a little bit more of a visual flair. I feel like that's what this movie was missing, was just more visually interesting stuff, because that's what makes Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies good. This one wasn't particularly visually interesting. It was very standard. It was very same old. We've seen this kind of action before, and that's nothing bad, but it's also something I kind of wish they did. I wish they made something that would stand out amongst the rest and could make this one a different movie. But for the most part, I would still say this is a great movie. I would highly recommend it. I'd give this about an 8 out of 10 if I had to give it a numerical score. It's a pretty solid movie. I would say it's a great movie. And well worth the time, well worth the money. Go see it in theaters. It's a lot of fun. Whether I see it in 3D, I would say no, because there's a lot of action scenes. I watched this in 2D and it was a little disorientating, let alone in 3D. I probably would have walked out of that theater just being like, can I just get a 2D screening of this? I can't stand this anymore. So, you know, that's just me personally. But thank you again for watching Ryan Recommends. I hope to see you another time where I go to the movies and go see something that I'm actually interested in, because I personally haven't been able to go out to the theaters very often. Maybe I'll just talk about a movie I really like on the channel. These are some of my more laid-back videos, so just, you know, nothing too crazy or interesting, you know, and just, hopefully I'll see you next time on my next big review that I have coming forward. I have not really planned on what movie to watch yet, but I will figure something out. So I hope to see you guys next time, and thanks a lot. Please subscribe to the channel for more content, and please check out my last 2 reviews I've done, which is Jurassic School and Friday the 13th. And I hope that you all have a wonderful night and take good care. See ya.